Good afternoon, everyone, and I'll call this General Purpose and Administration Committee meeting to order. Matters from closed session. Where are the matters from closed session? Here. Previously to this meeting, we had a meeting in closed session, and sorry that it delayed this meeting a little bit, and thank you for your patience. I'm looking for a motion that $9,000 of the remaining security be released to 2242960 Ontario Inc., that the remainder of the security, which is $152,678.85, be retained by the township until a record of site condition is filed and approved by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, or all soil that exceeds MECP Table 2 criteria is removed from the site, that the owner of 13471 Lake Ridge Road be allowed to remove the no dumping sign from the property entrance, and that the court order on file preventing further fill placement on site remain in place. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Watton, seconder. Councillor Guido, questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Second motion from the in-camera session, that the Township of Scugog is willing to continue the agreement for the Brock's parking lot under substantially the same terms and conditions as outlined in bylaw 43-19 and without any additional costs to the township, and in absence of the continuation of the current agreement, the bylaw and agreement shall end on December the 31st, 2019 in accordance with the current term. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Ross, seconded. Councillor Brown, questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements from council and staff. Any announcements from council? Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to remind everyone that this weekend is the Santa Claus Parade hosted by Scugog Chamber of Commerce, as well as, I believe it is the Lions that put this on. So Santa Claus is coming to town, and I hope that everybody's able to make it out and enjoy our annual tradition.
Well, I think all of council can be on the good list, I think. I think we're all pretty, yeah. Anything further? Councillor McDougall?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make an announcement that the Greenbank Blacklight Puppeteers have shows going on in both Greenbank, and they also have a show that's going on at the United Church in Port Perry at Queen Street. I'm not sure of exactly the date, but they do have a Facebook page for the 2019 Greenbank Blacklight Puppeteer shows, so that might be a good spot to look it up. Thank you.
They are excellent. I recommend everybody to go and see that show. Thanks for bringing that forward. Any other announcements from council? Seeing none, announcements from staff. Yeah, you've been busy writing reports, as we see by today's agenda, so thank you very much. And now I'm moving on to Leadership Development Graduation Awards, and this is really, really exciting, and I am so proud of members of our staff that have taken advantage of this program. It is the strategy of staff and council to support succession planning throughout the organization by recognizing emerging leaders and encouraging them to grow in their skills and abilities. The Township of Scugog's Leadership Development Program is a program that supports this strategy. The program uses the Kousses and Posner model, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, for effective leadership. The 5 practices of exemplary leadership, and provides emerging leaders with the skills and confidence required to succeed. Sessions were run once per month for 5 months, with each one being 1 full day in length. Each session covered one of the 5 practices and encouraged attendees to explore their personal style of leadership, review common misconceptions, develop new leadership skills, and set personal leadership goals. The facilitator for the Leadership Development Program is Scugog's own Manager of Human Resources, Robin Holowski. Robin spent 4 years as a senior learning consultant for a major acute care hospital before moving into HR as a senior business partner. She has taught leadership development for several organizations, including Lakeridge Health, Rouge Valley, Scarborough Hospitals, the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, and Ontario Shores. Robin also worked for 3 years as a part-time professor of social service work for Centennial College, and she holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Toronto and a social work diploma from Centennial College. 6 participants from the Township of Scugog and 6 participants from the town of Uxbridge had the opportunity to network with like-minded colleagues, share stories, and build a common framework for the future of leadership, one that supports the desired culture of the organizations. Finally, I would like to express how incredibly proud Council is of the staff who have taken the initiative to attend this course. It certainly speaks to your loyalty and commitment to our organization. I'd also like to say how fortunate we are to have someone so well qualified on our staff to provide this training. Congratulations to each and every participant. I am certain that we will all benefit from your new knowledge and experience. Now I'd like to call on the recipients of our congratulations. And I first like to call on Tanya Bugden to come forward. I'm going to call them up one by one, and then we're going to have a group picture. Tanya, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Donna Cornish. Lisa Fitton. Congratulations. Thank you. Rob Frasca. And Todd Sumer.
Thank you very much.
And Clint Walker. Okay, can we have council come up along here and our recipients here, and we'll have a group picture. Yes, Robin. Yes, Robin. Okay, you don't need to stand up.
I do.
Yeah.
I'll be hiding away.
You want me to?
No, my
Oh.
goodness.
I can stand up here.
Robin, maybe you should get up right there. So just about balance. Okay, how's this for balance?
Does it work?
Yes, open them up.
Certificate.
Thank you.
There you go, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to the consent agenda. So far I have one poll, 9.2.3, Is that you, Councillor McDougall? Was it? Yeah. And did you have?
9.2.1 and 9.2.8.
Any other polls?
9.2.4.
Okay. Okay, could I have a mover, please, that the items listed under Section 9 consent agenda be approved, save and accept items 9.2.1, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.8. Moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Ross. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Was that McDougall and Ross? Guido, was it? Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry, 9.2.1, Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I'd like to move that these minutes be received and that the restriction of the weight vehicles passing over Job Road Bridge be brought forward for adoption with a couple questions to, I believe, Director Coleman. Question in regards to the new load level, load level restrictions. How do these restrictions affect the large municipal vehicles that access the Salt Dome over Job Road Bridge?
Director?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the councillor, the vehicles accessing the dome will need to come from the west side. Technically, by the Highway Traffic Act, winter maintenance vehicles are exempt, but only while they're in the winter operations. So they can access from the east side to the depot.
Okay,
Further?
thank you. Further to that, excuse me. Beforehand in budget talk, there was questions in regards to single dome or single depot versus two depots, and one of the reasons for not having just a single depot was the amount of time it would take for trucks to respond to. How much extra time was expected for the vehicles to have to access that dome from the west now?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the councillor, they couldn't, if this new weight restriction, they didn't meet the old weight restriction either, so there's no difference in the time. And the depot's a short distance from Regional Road 57 and Highway 7A, so it's pretty easy access to those major roads to get to the other roads.
Great, thank you.
Yes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in terms of exemptions on load restrictions, are agricultural vehicles exempt as well? Through you, Madam Mayor?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the councillor, yes, they are.
So grain wagons and combines, et cetera, are all exempt from the load restrictions.
That's correct. The Highway Traffic Act exempts agricultural vehicles. However, if heavy loads continue to use the bridge, it will shorten the life of the bridge.
Yes.
And if that happens before we have the funds to replace it, there could be a closure for a period of time.
Further through you, Madam Mayor, just a question. Are they responsible for any damage that they might cause to the bridge because of the heavy loads?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, no, they're not.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, any other questions? I have a seconder, please, for that motion. Councillor Guido? No more questions or comments. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Now moving to 9.2.3 on page 14, Councillor McDougall, did you want to make that motion?
Yes, I motion to receive that.
Receive, and the other recommendations?
Yes, and I'll motion for those as well.
That staff be authorized to develop a concept plan for Queen Street between Water Street and Perry Street as a temporary pedestrian zone, and that staff be authorized to undertake public consultation on the pilot project and draft concept plan. Okay, I'll take your questions first, and or would you rather we have a little bit of background from?
Certainly, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, Robin, is there something you would like to highlight from this report?
The report, I don't know if you can hear me. The report kind of speaks to what was presented in the strategic plan for this term of council with respect to creating a pedestrian zone on Queen Street in downtown Port Perry. This is allowing us to initiate that process with respect to looking at some concept plans for that, as well as discussing what the duration might be of such a pedestrian zone. and some of the other considerations with respect to operations and how it gets set up and things like that.
Okay, so this is a pilot project?
Yes.
And the timelines for that?
The timelines to get it done, we would, if we can get a concept plan and we would report back to council hopefully in the spring, and we might look at next summer to implement a pilot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that background. Councillor McDougall, your question?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Port Perry has a pretty long history of open streets type festivals. We just haven't quite coined them as such. I've heard some talk of there's concern about the frequency of the street being closed. In fact, I mean, the talk in general is that the street will be closed all summer long and you won't be able to have access. Have we looked at harnessing the existing open streets festivals that we already have, the Santa Claus Parade, the Easter bonnet contest, which is fabulous. There's so many that we do have. And I'm just thinking that if we can portray this as we're already having these, this is just more of a formality of that. Have we considered that in this proposal? Through you, Madam Mayor.
So we did look at the number of times that Queen Street is closed for a portion of either parades or events, as you mentioned. There are a number over the course of a year. This would be something that would be what was intended to be in addition to that, which would look at closing it more for creating a pedestrian place where it would be considered more of a tourism draw that would help the businesses in the downtown. And that could look at, again, we would come back with some recommendations on the duration of how long the pilot would go. Again, this is just a pilot to see if it works, and if it doesn't, if there's any interest, we're just asking to be able to go out to the community and to the chamber and to the business BIA to figure out if there is support for it, or what some of the concerns are.
Very good. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think it's a great idea. I know Councillor Watton does too, if I'm not mistaken. We talked about this some time ago. The timeline I understand. I'm not sure how you're going to liaise with the BIA, so can you tell me where you're going to go from there? Because some business owners want it. Some business owners don't think it works for them. So, and that's what I've heard so far. So how are you going to connect with them, and where do you plan to go with it with BIA?
I believe we were hoping to go to one of their meetings, as well as the chamber, and just kind of outline what we're proposing and getting some feedback that way. As we deal with often in the planning area, we get conflicting feedback sometimes, so it's to take all the feedback we can from differing views and kind of present that back to council with a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, liaising with the BIA membership would be extremely important for this. Being the former BIA representative from council, when this topic has come up many times, you have opposing businesses who don't rely on the tourism aspect. They just have a day-to-day business that they are not in favor of that street being closed. So I think it would need to be properly conveyed to the membership that they need to attend the meeting to have their say for that aspect. Anyways, the specialized services that will be retained to help with this, is that like a consultant, or what is a specialized service, or who would that be?
Through you, Madam Mayor. If we were to move forward with the concept plan, we could hire, one of the ideas was you could hire a consultant, and most likely a landscape architect, to put together a concept of what could be done on the street if it was a pedestrian zone, depending on the duration of it.
So on page 15 of our council agenda, which is 2 of 4 of the actual report, it says staff propose to retain specialized services to design a concept plan. So I guess my question is, who, that's not a consultant, that is who?
It would be most likely a consultant
Okay.
if staff don't have the expertise on hand.
Okay, so a consultant can be found for $2,500?
To put together a concept plan only.
Wow. And what does a concept plan look like? It's their vision of what the closure would look like?
Yes.
And does that include feedback, or that's for staff to garner the feedback from the BIA and chamber? And
That would be for staff to take out to use as part of the consultation as
Okay.
an option for if it was closed, here's what could be done with that area.
And would they then recommend what this pilot project looks like? Is it weekends only? Is it for an entire month, or is that staff coming up?
I think that would be more staff-driven in terms of all the feedback we receive from different departments as well as the community.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I had one, as regards to gathering feedback. When we were going into the pilot project for the patios, Ontario counties did like a third party, if you will, survey on how that was received. Will that be considered as part of the feedback? I know it was before you came, so I just want to make sure you're aware of it and
That was brought to my attention, so it is something we will look at if there already has been feedback on this type of idea in that
Okay.
area.
That's great, because I remember it was mentioned several times during that process. And you mentioned that it is part of the strat plan, which was as a result of Speak Up Scugog. And you'll be reviewing those as well, I presume. Okay, all of that feedback. Okay, that's great. So we have mover, Councillor McDougall. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Watton? Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to 9.2.4 on page 18. Councillor McDougall, did you wish to make that motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it? For the benefit of our
I forgot
listening-
my glasses, so if you
Oh,
could
you
read it.
haven't got your, okay.
Thank you.
I got a pair in the office if you want. That report DEV 2019-36 dated December 2nd, 2019, entitled Envision Durham, Environment and Greenlands System and Transportation System Discussion Papers be received, and that staff be authorized to submit this report to Durham Region as the township's comments on the Environment and Greenlands System and Transportation System Discussion Papers. You're moving that?
Yes, then, thank you
Okay,
very
do
much for
I,
reading.
Your question then, please?
My question was down on page 4 or 5 of the report, page 21, and it talks about the transportation system in the discussion of the paper. It talks about transit and transportation demand management, and it speaks about different transportation systems, but I don't see a lot of talk about transit and reference to transit and how that could reduce. I think the wording was about reduce auto travel through the development. Can someone speak to that in terms of this report?
Who's the author? Robin, would you,
Yeah.
could you do that?
Yeah. So the paper, through you, Madam Mayor, the paper does speak to transit. That is one of the modes that it does look at, and that's something, so we do reference how when we're looking at new development and new development guidelines, we look at ways to promote alternative modes of transportation and not just vehicles, so that includes transit as well as other forms of transportation. But we again have to work with Durham Region Transit and what they offer through that.
So further through that, are you familiar with the transportation hierarchy through the regional transportation plan through Metrolinx and through the Durham's master planning document?
Yeah, so the paper is drawing a lot of the recommendations from the region's most recent transportation master plan process. And that looks at the different hierarchy of the provincial, regional, and local modes of transportation.
So first off being trip avoidance, then active transportation, then transit, then rideshare, ride hailing, and followed by private automobile last. I'm just curious in terms of this paper and back to the region, we have had regional transit removed from us in terms of the GO. That will have ultimately the reverse effect in terms of what this paper is asking for. Has that been brought to the region's attention through this paper?
This paper was, I haven't specifically commented on that. I'm happy for council to add that if they so choose. The paper is just more high level. There wasn't any recommendations coming out of it yet. It's more just asking for feedback from the local municipalities in terms of the direction they're gonna head with their regional official plan review with respect to transportation. So we've made the comment that we appreciate and support moving forwards with looking at those alternative modes of transportation and transit.
Very good. That's all. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and just as a reminder, as a member of the public, you can also comment on these discussion papers. So if you wanted to highlight that particular thing, you're welcome to do that. And when you talked about planning of communities, they would be like walkable communities. Is that, would that be fair to say? So
That's correct, and you also look at trails and bike paths and things like that. So
Good.
every single mode of transportation.
yeah, alternatives to cars.
That's
Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Robin. On page 3 of 5, the third last paragraph, can you provide some clarity on what you mean or what it would look like? Designating rural lands separately from environmental areas will help direct non-agriculture uses that are more appropriate in rural locations away from prime agricultural areas and environmentally sensitive areas consistent with the Greenbelt Plan. Can you just, I read it several times and I'm not really clear on what we're hoping to accomplish from that.
Sure. So through you, Madam Mayor, the Greenbelt Plan actually kind of creates that hierarchy in itself in terms of distinguishing prime agricultural areas from rural lands from environmental lands. And the items that you would often see directed more to those rural lands, because the prime agricultural areas are to be protected for agricultural uses and agricultural related uses. Some of the other uses you would see directed to those rural lands that aren't necessarily often found in urban areas but still have a place in the rural area is recreational and tourism, institutional type, and resource-based commercial industrial uses. So some examples would be golf courses, bed and breakfasts, kennels, cemeteries, campgrounds. Those are often directed to those rural areas because they have that land expansive type use. But you don't want to see them use up those prime agricultural lands for those types of uses. Those are just some examples.
No, perfect, thank you.
The one thing I will add just to that is there is still a process that they'd have to apply for those uses. They're not an outright permission. It's just helping to direct where those go.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you, Robin, for all the work that you put into this and for answering our questions today. So, thank you. I need a seconder for the motion. Councillor Watton, all those in favor? And that's carried, thank you. Moving on to 9.2.8, on page 38, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, questions directed to the chief. Nature of my questions are just in regards
Councillor
to...
Ross, do you want to make the motion?
Excellent, we'll make the motion, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, go ahead.
Questions are in regards to the consultation that happened both with the public as far as the burn ban times and with the agricultural community in regards to the section on, larger fires of landowners. If you could speak to consultation that's happened.
Through you, Your Worship. Consultation in the very traditional form of going out to the public and asking for feedback, that did not happen. This bylaw and the bylaw changes are as a result of our interaction with the public and in enforcing the bylaw that was passed in 2018, and more specifically with respect to the recreational burns at campgrounds. That's with the public. With our farming community, we have been in consultation with them through the Ag Committee meetings that happen here in this chamber actually, and I've gotten their feedback as well as the feedback from other municipalities in how they are handling the Ag group and their burning.
Further through you, Madam Mayor. Okay, just to break it up, with the Ag community, were there any concerns that were raised about what's currently in here as it stands now, the amended bylaw?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, there was. Frankly, the ag community would like to burn, and burn whatever they feel they need to burn, and at no cost. In my research, I found that bylaws in general, municipal bylaws in general, cannot interfere with a normal farming practice. So my goal is, when we meet with the Ag Committee next, is to try and define what normal farming practices may be, and be able to then enforce a normal farming, a non-normal farming practice versus a normal farming practice for the purpose of issuing open air fire permits.
Okay. So if this is passed, then there's a number of things that have come to my attention through, whether just through going through it myself or been kind of keyed towards from people who are looking at burning. In specific, point 43 on page, we're looking at page 49, which is 12 of 17 of the report. Point 43, subsection F, so the person who to whom the permit is issued, or another responsible person identified in the permit shall tend to the fire until it's extinguished. Are those people identified when the permit is actually issued by name?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
And is there any aspect that it can be changed during the burn, knowing that these burns go on for some time, sometimes, that person has to be moved out or changed around? Is there ability to adjust that while it's happening?
Through you, Your Worship, I won't say no. I can tell you at the time of application, we request the names then. I mean, an individual to which the permit is named to could call and make amendments to the other responsible person's names.
Okay, great. So there's communication that can go back and forth.
Through Your Worship, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Just further to that then, thank you for those answers on the ag side. On the camping establishment, the recreational side, maybe you could speak to why why is the 11 o'clock curfew on for the public, and now we're looking at lifting it for the camping establishment? What are the concerns that you have for between 11 or 2300 and 0800 in the morning?
Through you, Your Worship, we chose the 11 p.m. with the 2018 bylaw to coincide with the public noise bylaw per se, in that all noise shall shut down around 11 p.m. at night. And I, pardon me for my ignorance in the actual name of that bylaw, but we selected that time frame to coincide with that. When it came to our camping establishments, they were very loud and clear that they would perhaps like that rule to be changed, and they be given the flexibility to enforce that type of rule within their camping establishments.
So through you, Madam Mayor, is it fair to say then that this is not a fire concern, that between 11 and 8 fires are unruly and out of control and require a response, but it's because fires are often perhaps a social gathering, not including camping fires, if it's linked together with the noise complaint? Is that, do those two tie together?
Through Your Worship, that'd be a good knot. Okay.
The concern that's been raised by a number of people is that they are looking at burning, slash or something like that because they come home late, or because that's the only time that's available to them, conditions, whatever it is. Is there any way to apply to burn outside of that time frame within your permit, your fire permit, not for camping establishments, but for the general public?
Through you, Your Worship, I would prefer a black and white figure or number or time frame, so that my staff can then in turn enforce it, and not have to go back on specific or individual permits to see if there's a time frame attached to it. I believe it's fair to my staff that they have that 11 p.m. as a general rule, because my staff does take this bylaw, when they do noise complaints and they enforce the bylaw, they're very good at it. So.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so if there's a fire recorded at 11:01, who is responding to that complaint? Is it an entire truck that's going out to a campfire that's being burnt, like a controlled fire that's being burnt between 11 and 8?
Through you, Your Worship, that depends on how the call is called in and how it's interpreted by dispatch. Okay. There's everything from burning complaints to reported structure fires, and unfortunately people use their their creativity to
Sure.
to get the the enforcement there. So
Through Madam Mayor, so if it's a backyard, it's reported as a backyard small fire, but it's known to be outside the burning limits, can you give me an example of what the response would be if it's not a structure fire or a fire out of control?
through you, Your Worship, it'd be one truck. But again, we're a volunteer department, and that one truck, coming from Port Perry as an example, would be an alert to all the volunteers here in the Port Perry area to staff that one truck, knowing that not all can and would be able to respond, but that's how we do business.
Wait, so it's like a full response, would you consider that full response, or, so and when you say truck, it's pardon me, but like a fire truck as opposed to
Through you, Your Worship, it's one fire truck.
Okay. Okay, and is that considered measured for a small, as opposed to a, two guys heading out in a pickup truck to, slap on the wrist or a fine or bylaw? I know we don't have bylaw, but something like that. Is there a more measured response that could be, given that the 11 p.m. is in there and people may be burning outside of it?
Through you, Your Worship, measured response, as in could you measure it down, or what are you looking for?
Yeah, as opposed to all call out to all volunteers and a full truck going out, where that, just being very cognizant that we have limited resources when it comes to fire. So if we're using a fire truck to head out to a small within control that's been reported in control fire, but it's within this this time frame that's not allowed, that vehicle is not able to respond to another emergency call later on. So when I say measured, do we need a full truck there, or will a pickup truck with a single crew member who can say, you need to put your fire out, it's after bedtime?
Through you, Your Worship, personally, I would send two minimum, two firefighters in a truck, and in a truck capable of perhaps extinguishing the fire that has to be extinguished. The one 4x4 piece of apparatus that we have here has a limited amount of water and hose resources on it, and it is only in the one station. I would prefer the larger truck, and here's the other side of the rationale is, to your point, what if another emergency came in? And perhaps only 4 or 5 firefighters showed up to the call. They could then, make a decision based on the risks and the needs and respond to the other call versus dealing with the burning complaint at that time and perhaps come back to the burning complaint at a later time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The last question through Madam Mayor. In regards to the campfires being allowed in recreational campsites after 11 o'clock, often campsites have perhaps a higher risk with attendance to a fire. Alcohol is involved often. Combustible structures are nearby. Is that taken into account when extending the hours, knowing that the same issue will be there as far as staffing and using of resources?
Through you, Your Worship, in this proposal here, this bylaw proposal here, you'll see that there is a rate increase for the camping establishments. What I'm proposing in that rate increase is that we are going to go out and two things. We're going to inspect each camp establishment, and then we're going to give some education to the establishment itself as to better enforcing our rules and their rules when it comes to campfires.
Okay, great. Last one in regards to the April no ban policy. Last year we saw April being a particular wet month, and understanding your comments back then about the levels of burn, the fuel that's beneath. With climate change and knowing that we never know what we're going to get, having April as a set month as opposed to watching the weather as it comes up and being able to place the ban at any given time, as it stands now, it's in stone that it's April, but if we still have snowpack, or perhaps it needs to be extended to March because it's been a warm spring, this doesn't give that flexibility to your department. Is that what you're after, or would you prefer have more flexibility as to when the fire ban can set?
Through you, Your Worship, I would suggest I have the flexibility to extend actually the burn ban. To change it from that month of April, no, I don't. And I would suggest that April is two things. It's very consistent with a lot of municipalities up here in the north, beyond our boundaries and beyond Durham region. And it's been very traditional that there's been in that month the conditions that you described, that would suggest are a higher risk for us when it comes to the wildland fires.
Okay, because last April, I know I took a number of calls saying it's wet. Why is it now? Why isn't it next month? Understanding that there is a need for it, but people don't want it extended, obviously. So to have that to be able to move from your department, that's my point. But okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just a couple, Chief, I think. On page 39, we'll use the MNR danger rating tools, which I think is just in front of what Councillor Ross was speaking about. Right, staff concluded that utilizing the Ministry of Natural Resources Canada Forest Fire Danger Rating Tool as the premise. There's an obvious answer to this. Is that those aren't the signs on the way into town saying forest fire rating danger?
Through you, Your Worship, yes and no. A lot of communities do use those signs. How they determine how they're going to move the measurement of the signs or the visual that you're seeing on the road, I can't tell you that. We've decided and proposed that we need to have something that's more factual and data driven, and the Ministry of Natural Resources through the Government of Canada, in fact, give us that type of data that we can make better decisions on when it comes to the risks of fire.
Okay.
And perhaps a ban.
Thank you. And if I may, Madam Mayor, subsequent to Councillor Ross's question about I just want to make sure I understand this. So basically, half a paragraph below it. Exceptions, camping establishments, permit type, and fires beyond 11 p.m., recreational fires on waterfront properties in Port Perry. So I get that you can allow them past 11 o'clock. Would that be right?
Through Your Worship, in a camping establishment, yes.
Is it until 8 o'clock in the morning? Where do you draw the line there? I mean, what if somebody wants to start a fire at 2 o'clock in the morning? I mean, alcohol may be involved there too.
Through Your Worship, in a camping establishment, this is where we're going to work with our camping establishment owners and come to I hope a working relationship that speaks to when to shut things down and learn what their rules are in managing their camping establishments. And I'm hoping that in giving them the flexibility that they've been looking for, in turn, we're going to get cooperation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McDougall?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Some questions. So is it my understanding that we're extending the burning permits into the into the town itself for Port Perry?
Through Your Worship, no, that's not correct.
So I think it's 27, section G on page 48. Recreational open air fire permits are permitted on single-family residential waterfront properties, including in Port Perry?
Through Your Worship, what you see there is actually an edit. We had that restriction twice within in the bylaw from 2018, so we struck it. It is still in right in Part 2 restrictions, number 11. No fires are permitted in Port Perry, Prince Albert urban area.
So not along the shoreline waterfront in Port Perry?
We have created exceptions to the waterfront in Port Perry.
And in the hamlets, are you allowed to have a burn permit for a residential lot?
For Your Worship, yes.
Okay. With regards to the 11 p.m., because I have received some complaints with regards to that, for recreational burns at residential properties outside the urban area. The thought is 11 p.m. is pretty early to be shutting down a fire that you're sitting around with, your family at. Any comments on that?
Through Your Worship. As I said to Councillor Ross, I would prefer a hard and fast timeline for my staff to enforce. If council chooses to have it at 12 midnight or 3 in the morning, that's council's choice. And I would entertain whatever your decision is.
Would it be fair to say, Chief, that as periodically we get a request for an exception to the noise bylaw for a family wedding that's in a neighborhood, would it be fair to say that they could also apply to have a function where they're going to need a recreational fire until, say, 2 o'clock in the morning, as long as you know about it? And would that be an option?
Yes, thank you for the question. It definitely would be an option within the bylaw, have the authority to make amendments on a case-per-case basis.
Does that help you with your question?
Sorry, excuse me, a little bit, but I would think I would prefer if we just made it midnight instead and say at the change of day, that's when your fire goes out, because I think that's a little more reasonable.
Thank you. Anything else? Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to the chief, can you just go back to something that Councillor McDougall asked in respect to waterfront properties? I wasn't sure I fully understood. On page 39 of our council agenda, when it speaks to exceptions, it says, exceptions, camping establishments, permit type, and fires beyond 11 p.m., recreational fires on waterfront properties in Port Perry. So does that mean if I live over in Castle Harbor, for example, and I live on the waterfront, then I'm exempt and I am able to have fires longer than 11 p.m.?
Through you, your worship, longer than 11 p.m., no, not with the current bylaw. But if your piece of property, as an example, you can entertain the restrictions when it comes to having a campfire or a recreational type fire. So as an example, I believe they are 5 meters. Yes, 5 meters from any type of combustible material. If your property is such that you can, and you are waterfront property, then yes, you'd be permitted to have a recreational fire. So in other words, if I may, your worship, if you have a waterfront property that is a 30-foot lot, you won't be getting a recreational permit. If you have property that is a 30-foot lot and is covered with trees, has numerous buildings on it, you won't be getting a permit because you can't meet the basic provisions of the recreational permit, and that's to keep the fire a certain distance away from any type of combustibles.
So may I ask then why we're distinguishing waterfront properties? What does that matter in this?
Through you, your worship, I believe it's a definition of who we are as a community, being on a lake, being a lakeside community, and it's working with our residents that still have lakefront property that are used as cottages, or perhaps living by them on a year-round basis.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I apologize. I'm still not quite sure if I understand where the restrictions fall on here and the exemptions fall. So if I have an in-town, non-waterfront property that's an acre, I'm not exempted at all. But if I have the same property on the waterfront, I'm exempted?
Through you, your worship, that's correct.
Okay, I may have to come back because I'm not sure I understand why the waterfront part is being distinguished other than it could be used as a cottage. Is that?
Through you, your worship, I believe it's very indicative of the community that we are, being on the water and giving people that have waterfront property the opportunity to utilize their lands on the water in a recreational way.
But if I have the same piece of property not located on the water, then I'm not able to use it the same way as someone that is on the water. Is that?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? I've got a couple. On page 42, 5 of 17 in the report, farmer means the owner-operator of an agricultural operation. Registered?
Thank you for the question. Yes, registered farm.
Can we put that in? Do you think it would be advisable to put that in, a registered agricultural operation? Because we do have hobby farms that really aren't farms. So, but 10 acres is, I guess, considered a hobby
Yes,
farm.
yeah, for sure.
So registered, I think would be good. Thank you. And just to be clear, you, on the 4th, at the Agricultural Roundtable, you'll be making a presentation on how this bylaw affects agricultural areas, farms. Can you just give us a very brief snapshot of what the difference is between this and the previous bylaw for normal farm practices, for
Sure,
instance?
thank you. So the bylaw that's currently in place, 2018, all farmers were required to purchase permits. What this bylaw is doing, or is proposing, is again, in cooperation with the individual farmer and going out and inspecting what they're proposing to do, it's allowing them, or allowing us to waive the fee for the permit, the fire
Thank you.
permit, as long as it's a normal farming operation.
Okay, that's good news. Thank you very much.
welcome.
That answers my questions. Oh, Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To the chief, just two quick questions. One, what is the benefit to the public for having the 2,300 hour cutoff for fires?
Through you, your worship, the risk of fire is greatly reduced at 11 p.m., I would hope, through the lack of recreational unattended burns.
So the difference between a 10 o'clock in the evening and a midnight risk factor, or versus 2 o'clock in the morning, is there a risk factor of the fire getting out of control, or is it?
Through you, your worship, I guess we could debate this one for a while. How much alcohol is involved? Did I start my day at 4 o'clock in the morning and I fell asleep in front of my fire? I mean, as I said earlier, we chose 11 p.m. to coincide with the noise bylaw, my staff likes something that's black and white. It's easy for them to enforce. If council wishes to choose a different time, then by all means.
Through you, Madam, just follow up. Is there any fallout if this report is deferred? I'd rather not discuss it on council floors here when we're rushing to a decision if it's 11 or midnight or there is no ban. But there are concerns that 11 o'clock, and I understand your concerns with the risk going up with alcohol and attentiveness to a fire. But I'd like to see a number that works for the rural community, that works for shift workers, that work for people all throughout. And maybe it is 11 o'clock, but with it being just linked to the noise complaint, I'm not sure. So is there any fallout if this is deferred for some consultation?
Through you, your worship, this report is coming to council in a timely fashion because we renew our open air burning permits at the beginning of each year. And I would suggest the beginning of the year, believe it or not, is one of the busier times of the year. So trying to get this resolved now and before the end of the year so that we can reset the numbers, so to speak, and staff and how they deal with both the public and in our farming community would be my goal.
This is not finalized today. We do have to ratify it at the council meeting on the, 17th, 19th, whatever the date is, 16th?
Right, which is through you, Madam Mayor, and that may be enough time, and perhaps at the council meeting, if concerns haven't been flushed out on both sides, then that's the time to go to defer it. But okay.
Maybe not defer it, but maybe you got a few weeks to make a decision.
Mm.
Yeah. Councillor McDougall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just thinking I would rather amend the report right now, and then if we need to look at it again at council, we can take a second look. But I'd rather make the amendment at this point in time.
Anybody else? Are you making an amendment, or?
Sure, I'll make a motion to amend to the 11 p.m. to midnight.
Have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Watton? Questions, comments to the amendment only? Councillor Brown?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I guess my question is to you, Chief. So we're going to go from 11 until midnight now, we're going to change it. What difference does it make for you?
Through your worship, none whatsoever. We'll train our staff and they'll know it's 12 midnight versus 11 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, black and white.
Thank you.
Okay. To the amendment, any other questions, comments? Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Just a question to Councillor McDougall.
Did we get a
Can
second?
you just explain midnight versus 1, or what your thought process is?
Counselor Watt? Second, I'm sorry, yeah, okay. To the amendment. To the amendment, oh, sorry, yeah, okay, sorry. I missed your question because I was asking about a seconder, so please, go ahead.
I'm just trying to, just prodding Councillor McDougall's brain for why midnight and not 1 or 11:30.
I guess I'm following Chief's kind of line of thinking and just thinking in terms of black or white, but I mean, midnight is the change of one day to the next, and it's better than 11 p.m., so maybe that's better than, in my mind, that's better than midnight, and I can see where that goes from here for the next 12 months.
Any other questions or comments to the amendment? Counselor Watton?
Madam Mayor, and through you to the chief, just a quick question on the normal farming practices and so on. So,
We're speaking to the amendment
oh, I'm
only?
sorry.
Yeah,
Oh, I
to the
thought we
amendment
had
only.
already finished that.
It's okay. Any other questions? Okay, to the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Then that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, back to the main motion as amended. Counselor Watton.
Just to the normal farming operations, I'm just not clear if a farmer is doing normal farming operation, he still needs to apply for a permit, but he does not necessarily need to pay. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Counselor McDougall.
Thank you. Just one further clarification. So through a more normal farm practices operation, they will apply for a permit, but you do have the right to deny that permit. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes. In denying it, we determine that it's not a normal farming practice.
Okay. All right. And
If I may give you an example, I want to clear cut 10 acres of wooded lot and then begin to farm it. That is not a normal farming practice. So inherently, two things would happen. You'd have to exercise a permit, and then B, we determine how you're going to dispose of that product or that wood. Perhaps an incinerator is brought in, etc.
Okay, thank you. I haven't asked too many questions on the farming side because I'm sure between now and council that they'll get a look at it at the ag session, and I'm sure I have several other members who are on DAC that will be looking at this as well, so I'll hear back from them. But thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. No more questions or comments. Need a seconder for that motion? I think you made the motion, didn't you? You made the motion. You really feel strongly about it. Counselor Guido. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. No correspondence. Notices motion. Motion to adjourn. Counselor Guido. Seconded. Counselor Brown. All those in favor? Carried. 2:45.
Awesome.